All right, so this is the last one on the list of I think it's 8 we've got in total.
Yeah.
I might recap them at the end. We'll
You
see.
have to filter it down to 8.
Finance skills.
You know, do you reckon this one would have been if we had to number them all? Do you reckon this would be at the top?
I thought about this. I actually thought about this as a question overall. Sequencing matters here. Like sequencing matters a lot. If you were really strong at finance skills, but you couldn't sell or self-manage yourself, kind of useless.
Yep.
Right. So why these are 8 skills that definitely, if you learn them, will pay you forever. I would order these differently on timelines. Like it's pretty hard to argue with the idea in the beginning. If I was just looking at this list quickly here before I get into the point, if I was going to get good at something like when I first got into business, networking and sales.
Hands down. I think everything's almost irrelevant. Like you build your product based off the people you've sold.
Yeah. So then I looked at the next one on the list here, and I'm almost going to say that like self-management and delegation fit into the next category. Maybe problem solving and feedback loops to a point as well. But to get momentum and get things moving, it's like there's no point being great at the skill that will serve you later on.
Yep.
So in the case here, if you got really strong at finance skills in the beginning of your journey, great. You're going to be able to measure exactly how broke you are.
Yes. And the reasons why you're broke. Yes.
I'm not doubting there's power in that, but I would say that this is a skill you start to learn the deeper you get into it.
Yep.
Now, I mean, how deep do you want to go on this one?
I want to go deep because the last point, man, we have to.
I will, geez, I'm going to go out there on it's not even really a limb here, but so to kind of layer these a little bit, finance is the feedback loop I use to then direct strategy in the business. Right. So even now I've just got my monthly reports for my property business. I go over that first and then discern what strategies, actions, tactics, and things like that make sense.
Yep.
Right. So it's such a huge component that I think it is so critical, probably even more so on the investment side of things, but in business as well. And it's pretty close race in there. They're both hugely important.
Well, I think it's because a lot of why we're a business owner comes around being financially free. And the only feedback we get on that is finances, right? Like there's very few business owners, like obviously you've got your not-for-profits and things like that, which have even to that point, screw it. They're going for donations anyway.
Totally. They're still financially driven.
I can't even find a good example on this. Like there is always a fundamental reason as to why it's finance related. And finance is perfectly complex in its simplicity. Is that there's not a huge amount of moving pieces that you need to constantly understand and learn.
I disagree with that thoroughly.
But this is why I say it's simplistically complex because there are, I know you and I look at the P&L, balance sheet and cash flows regularly, but I know that I could throw you 5 different businesses and those reports and you'd be able to understand exactly where they're all at one point because it's so simple now that you understand it. And that's why I say it's like simplistically complex once you get through it.
I can say maybe. I get where you're coming from and I can agree with the ideation, but I just feel like finance is one of these things that it's like it's got a high bar of entry and then once you know it, it's actually easy.
That's a better way for me to put my simply complex. I think once you've done the hard work, it's then easier. Like you can just look at it and go, okay, good. This is where it is.
It's one of those things when you first get into business, right? And someone, when I first got a P&L cash flow report and a balance sheet, it's so overwhelming even reading your own.
Yep.
So it's like the bar of entry, the skill set required to actually make it useful is like there's a learning curve. Once you're good at it though, as you said, you can throw them across and glance because you know how to give it context.
Yep.
Like that's part of the skill in itself. And like that might just be on the business front, but this is where it's like you can go even further though and going like in the beginning, I think if everyone can just get really competent in reading a P&L, a cash flow report and a balance sheet, you're at a fantastic start.
Yep.
Where things get deeper than that though is the like cash flow management strategies, forecasting, like budgeting, debt management. Like there's a ton of layers that interblend between these that if you don't have that foundation, you won't be able to play in. So I guess a better way of saying it is like, let's say that if we were going to make it like maths, understanding the numbers 1 to 10 and maybe some addition and subtraction is like your P&L balance sheet and cash flow report. But there's all this like algebra and times tables and stuff you can get involved in. that can make a significant difference down the road. Like, just think about the subconscious idea of, like, in property, yields.
Oh, yeah. Compounding growth.
Yeah, compounding.
Inflation, like, everything just gets added on top of it.
Interest rates, percentages, like the layers of finance that play in that world, particularly in property, I will say in that example, huge.
Have you found that there is like an 80-20 principle to it? So once you understand the basic 80%, so to use your maths analogy again, which I think is great, like if you can count from 1 to 10, it's probably pretty easy for you to get from 10 to 100, 100 to 1,000, etc. But if you can do plus, minus, multiply, divide, you can do most maths equations fairly competently. There is just the final 20% that's more complicated that kind of will produce some kind of outputs. Do you think that the ability to read like P&L, balance sheet, cash flow statements and really start to understand what it means supports business, supports investing, but is also a foundation in order for you to understand exactly what we've just spoken about, which is like the interest rates, yields, compound growth, inflation, etc. Where if you didn't have that grounding, they would be a bit too complicated for you to understand because you didn't have that at the start.
Yeah, I would say that what I've seen, again, I fall into this very lucky category that it's like I live with an accountant. And so I realize my circumstance isn't the norm or what people have access to make their lives substantially easier in this world. But at the same time, it has given me a very interesting like context because I look at what I can do compared to like people I mentor or people we work with or you and I, although you have ridiculously strong finance skills for someone that doesn't have an accountant in the home. But the thing I most noticeably notice when it comes to finance skills, people learn how to read a P&L when they're small, right? So they learn how to read a P&L thinking it's like, and it will get them by, right? Right. So let's pretend, and this is where I've seen it. I'm not going to name any businesses here, but if someone has a coaching business where they are collecting some upfront payments and then have payment plans or using some sort of financing tools like Afterpay or ZipPay or OpenPay or whatever it is. In the beginning, when they're small, they can read a P&L. They think that's all they need to know when it comes to finance. Then they scale, and then suddenly the awareness comes in that, oh shit, my P&L says I made this much money, but that's not what's in my bank account.
Yep.
Where's the cash? And it's like they've already committed all the sins of growing a business off a P&L without understanding the cash flow report or the cash flow strategies, and they end up digging themselves in a really big hole.
Yep.
Right. And then the next sort of consequence of that is they start using like debt or other things to do it, which will show up on your balance sheet differently. Right. So then again, it's like they almost commit the sins of the first report into the second, into the third. But by the time they can understand and read all three of these, congratulations, they're now aware why they're a little bit fucked.
But and it's funny because when they work through that scenario, they're like, oh yeah, no, logically I can understand that as well. It's just that when you see it on paper, it's very different to think about. Hey, fellow business owner, if this topic and value-packed short video has resonated with you at all, and you want to dive deeper into creating wealth inside and outside your business, check out the full episode by clicking the link on your screen or in the description right now.